Have you ever felt like you don't belong anywhere? Have you ever been surrounded by people yet felt absolutely alone? Have you ever looked at the world, its rules, its rhythms, its demands, and thought, I'm not from here?
I do not feel at home anywhere in the world, wrote Albert Camus, echoing the silent cry many carry in their chest. Carl Jung in turn murmured that loneliness does not come from having no people around us, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to us. And H.P. Lovecraft was even darker. I am a stranger in this century and among those who are still men. This video is not about ready-made solutions. It's about hard truths, about that pain you try to ignore, but that always returns when everything goes quiet. Because maybe, and I whisper this like someone sharing a forbidden secret, maybe your feeling of dislocation is not a flaw. Maybe it's a truth too ancient to be understood by the modern structures of life, a truth that has echoed since the first human steps under the starry sky when there were no certainties, only the cold, the fire, and the silence. This is a space for wanderers, for those who, even surrounded by roads, feel that none of them lead home. Here we will descend together into the underground of the psyche. Among shadows and symbols, wounds and ghosts, this will be your shelter, not of belonging, but of understanding. You are not alone in your solitude. You may be at home right now and within familiar walls, surrounded by the objects you chose, the smell of coffee you love, maybe even someone sleeping beside you. And yet, a part of you remains absent, as if something is out of place, and that something is you. That sensation, that invisible wound, is the deepest exile there is, the exile from yourself. It's not exile from land, from country, or from group. It's that deafening silence that arises when you realize that no matter where you are or with whom, you still haven't arrived. You haven't reached the center. And worse, maybe you don't even know where that center is, or if it exists at all. Most people spend their lives chasing an illusory sense of belonging, a job title, a status, a social group, a happy ending. But the wanderer knows. He feels that none of it truly fills the void, that everything solid eventually dissolves into air. He understands, as the poet wrote in The Wanderer, that the joy of the banquet hall no longer sounds, and the gold once given by the Lord is now a cold memory in the hands. This wanderer lives on the threshold between what was and what will never be. He is not melancholic by choice. It's because he has seen too much, felt too much, lost too much, and everything he once touched with hope turned to dust. He tried to adapt, pretended to be what others expected, went to the parties, smiled in the photos, nodded in the meetings, but at some point, usually in silence, he understood. No matter how hard he tries, there will always be a space between him and the world, and that space is unbridgeable. Depth psychology, especially in Jung, speaks of the process of individuation, the painful journey of becoming who you truly are. And that process almost always begins with exile, because to find yourself, you must first get lost. You must first feel that nothing outside fits anymore, that the clothes of your social identity no longer fit, that the words of others sound empty, and that the mirror no longer reflects the same face. That's where the true wanderer begins. Not the one who changes cities, but the one who dives into the underground of his own soul. He trades comfort for confrontation, belonging for silence, and discovers that, paradoxically, to belong to himself, he must give up belonging anywhere else. Many fear this emptiness. They run from it as if it were madness. But the void, my friend, the void is the womb of true birth. The exiled soul is not dead, it is gestating. Nietzsche said, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." And it is precisely in exile, when everything seems lost, that the seeds of the true self begin to germinate. Do not despair for not belonging. Perhaps it is not a curse, but an initiation, a sacred preparation for a journey few have the courage to follow. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and feel it. The silence you fear may just be your true home. There's a kind of hunger that no food can satisfy. It's not thirst for water, nor lack of affection. It's something more subtle, more profound. It's a hunger that lingers even when everything seems to be in place, silent yet present, like an emptiness in the stomach of the soul. Have you ever felt it? That restlessness that appears in the middle of the afternoon for no apparent reason, that feeling that something is missing, even when you have everything, as if life, no matter how full, still slips through your fingers. This is the hunger of the wanderer, and it never goes away. because it's not an ordinary hunger, it's the absence of meaning, the absence of a home that isn't physical but spiritual. In Tibetan tradition, there is a powerful image, the realm of the hungry ghosts, beings with enormous bellies and tiny mouths, always starving yet incapable of feeding themselves. This metaphor perfectly captures our modern condition. We have access to everything, knowledge, pleasure, connection, and yet we remain hungry. We run from one project to another, one relationship to the next, one city after another, always hoping that the next thing will complete us. But the truth, the wanderer runs because he's fleeing, and what he's fleeing from is himself. Kierkegaard captured this precisely when he wrote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom," meaning when we realize that we are free, radically free, the weight of that freedom can become unbearable, because with it comes the responsibility of giving meaning to our own existence. And so, instead of facing that task, we seek distraction. Instagram, coffee, trips, empty conversations, endless series marathons, all to avoid confronting that inner hunger. But the more we avoid it, the hungrier we become. It's a cruel paradox. We have more options than ever before, yet less direction. We live surrounded by stimulation, yet starved for meaning. As Pascal said, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. The wanderer feels this more than anyone. He can sit in a fine restaurant, but the main dish he craves isn't on the menu, because what he longs for cannot be ordered, bought, or consumed. He wants a living experience of meaning, something that nourishes, yes, but also roots him, that fills him, yet doesn't imprison him. Jung reminds us, happiness is not a goal to be achieved, but a byproduct of a life lived with meaning. In other words, there is no point in chasing happiness directly. It emerges when one is aligned with what is true, with what pulses authentically within. And here lies the terrible and beautiful secret of the wanderer. He feels hunger, but he is not lost. He feels thirst, but he is on the path. Because this hunger that never ends is not just a curse. It's a calling to look beyond the surface, to stop searching in others for what can only be found within. The wanderer, in his pain, senses that this hunger exists to push him forward. It is compass, it is engine, it is the absence that reveals the presence of what truly matters. But beware, there is danger here. When hunger becomes unbearable, some try to fill the void with excess, and then we see addiction, compulsion, self-destruction. Like Icarus, they fly too close to the sun on wings of wax and inevitably fall. Others, however, learn to listen to their hunger, to welcome it as a sacred companion, and they discover that it doesn't need to be fed with things, but with presence. Presence before life, before pain, before oneself. The wanderer who listens to his hunger without trying to silence it learns to turn it into direction. He still feels the absence, but now it becomes fertile ground, sacred soil where something new can grow, something that is his own. So if you feel this hunger, do not fear it. Sit with it. Look it in the eyes. Ask what it's trying to show you. Perhaps, just perhaps, it is the map you've been searching for all along. Have you ever tried to run away from yourself? Have you filled your days with tasks, commitments, screens, and noise, all to avoid that moment when the world goes silent and you come face to face with yourself? It's in that silence that the real labyrinth reveals itself, not the labyrinth of streets, jobs, or relationships, but the one of the soul, a place where the paths are not physical but symbolic, where every turn is a thought, every wall is a memory, and every closed door is a pain you chose to forget. This labyrinth is built early on, word by word, trauma by trauma, rejection by rejection, and without realizing it, we become prisoners of our own defenses. Our ego, that mask we create to survive, becomes the architect of the labyrinth. It builds walls to protect us, but forgets that in doing so, it also isolates us. And then the great confusion begins. We think we're out in the world, when in truth we're just walking in circles inside ourselves. Jung taught us that what does not become conscious manifests as fate. In other words, everything we refuse to face within ourselves, our fears, traumas, repressed impulses, continues to act in the shadows, guiding our choices and sabotaging our paths. It's as if inside us there lives another, a hidden wanderer, wounded and hungry, trying desperately to get our attention. But we ignore it, because looking inward hurts, and no one ever taught us how to deal with that pain. we'd rather project, place onto others what we don't want to recognize in ourselves. What irritates us about others is, most of the time, just the reflection of what we deny in ourselves. The anger we feel towards someone who seems arrogant may be the shadow of our own repressed desire to set boundaries. The contempt we feel for someone fragile may be the refusal to accept our own vulnerability. And so, we keep feeding the labyrinth, lost within ourselves, alone in a crowded world. The problem is, the more we run, the stronger the labyrinth becomes, and the Minotaur, the creature that lives at its center, grows with it. That creature isn't an external monster. It's the accumulation of everything you've rejected within yourself. Your anger, your sadness, your loneliness, your longing to be loved, your shame. Everything you've said, "That's not me," is, in truth, exactly who you are. And the most frightening part, that creature doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to be seen. It wants to be integrated. It wants to come home. Carl Jung said, the gold is in the shadow. In other words, our greatest treasure is hidden precisely in the parts of ourselves we fear the most. It takes courage to go down there, to descend without a map, without guarantees, with only the trembling lantern of awareness. And here the myth of Theseus and Ariadne gives us a clue. Theseus, in order to kill the Minotaur, enters the labyrinth, but only manages to find his way out because Ariadne gives him a thread, the thread that guides him back. That thread symbolizes the connection to something greater, to love, to the sacred, to truth. In our case, that thread can take many forms. A genuine friendship, a book that awakens us, a therapist who welcomes us, a quiet moment that touches us, or even a video like this, slipping into your night like a whisper. Not to bring answers, but to remind you there is a way back. But the labyrinth, it doesn't disappear. It's part of you. The way out isn't to destroy it. It's to inhabit it with presence, to recognize that every dark corridor holds a story waiting to be heard, that every locked door guards a part of you, waiting to be set free. The wanderer lost in the labyrinth of the soul has two choices: either surrender to confusion and get lost even more, or begin, little by little, to talk to their ghosts, to ask, "Why are you here? What do you want to show me?" And when you do this, not as a technique, but with sincerity, the labyrinth begins to change. It remains complex, but starts revealing passageways, places of healing, refuges of truth. And suddenly you realize what once was a prison is now a temple. What once was chaos is now a map. The labyrinth of the soul is not a mistake, it is the path itself. But only those who stop running can see that. So if today you feel lost, if you feel empty, fragmented, without direction, don't run. Sit, close your eyes, and listen. The whisper echoing through the dark corridors of your soul isn't the sound of madness. It's the call to return to yourself. Don't try to conquer the labyrinth. Love it, and it will open. What if I told you that everything you've ever been searching for was never far away? That the place where you truly belong isn't a point on a map, a group, or an ideology, but a state of presence, a return, a silent recognition of who you are beneath all the masks. There comes a moment in every wanderer's journey when they stop running, not because they've found what they were looking for, but because exhausted, they begin to suspect they've been searching in the wrong place all along. That's when something shifts, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. As if the soul, after so many turns, finally whispers, "Now, yes, now we are ready to return home." But what home is this? It's not the one from your childhood, even if nostalgia takes you there. It's not someone's embrace, even if love soothes the heart. And it's not professional achievement, even if recognition offers momentary relief. The home I speak of is older than all of that. It's the silent point within you where there are no demands, no expectations, no performances, where you don't need to be smarter, prettier, more interesting, or stronger, where you are simply you, and that's enough. In the Buddhist tradition, this point is called Buddha nature, an essence that remains untouched, even when everything around it collapses. In mystical Christianity, it's the divine spark, the kingdom of God within you. For Jung, it's the self, the regulating center of the psyche, the totality of being that emerges once the ego finally surrenders. It is in this return that the wanderer stops drifting and becomes a conscious seeker. They still walk, they still face deserts, but now they walk with purpose, no longer fleeing from themselves, but sustaining their presence even amid chaos. You can call this awakening, enlightenment, individuation, The names don't matter. What matters is that, suddenly, loneliness turns into solitude, silence turns into prayer, and the wound turns into a portal. It's not that the pain disappears, but it begins to make sense, as if every sadness, every detour, every shadow had been necessary to bring you here, to this very moment when you hear, not my voice, but your own, whispering softly, "Come back. I'm here, I've always been," and you begin to remember what you loved before you were molded, what enchanted you before you were taught to fit in, what gave you joy before obligation, what you believed in before fear. You realize that exile was, in truth, a call to return, and no one comes back the same after being gone for so long. You return with deeper eyes, with more conscious steps, with a soul less anxious and more receptive, and this return home is not an arrival, it's a surrender. It's when you stop fighting life and start dancing with it. You no longer need to belong to anything outside of you, because inside you've recognized yourself, and that recognition changes everything. The same places where you once felt out of place now just seem too small. The same people who never understood you now simply confirm how much you've changed, and that old pain becomes story, not to be forgotten, but to be honored. You no longer need the world to validate you, because you finally feel whole, even in your imperfection. And maybe that's what home truly means, a state of being where you no longer need to explain yourself, where you can simply breathe and know, I'm here, I am. Jung once said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others. And maybe that's why, upon returning home, you become a lighthouse for other wanderers. You know what it's like to be lost. You know what it's like to blade in silence. You know what it's like to think you won't make it. And because of that, your presence begins to comfort, to illuminate, to remind. You'll return too. It's okay if you're still on the way. I've been there too, because now you understand no one belongs anywhere until they belong to themselves. And when that happens, anywhere can be home, and every path sacred. Perhaps the greatest lie we've been told is this, that there is a final place where we'll finally be complete, loved, understood, without conflict, without pain, without rupture. But the truth, raw yet liberating, is that we don't belong anywhere, because we are larger than any place could ever contain. You weren't made to fit in, but to expand. And if that expansion requires the pain of exile, the hunger that never ends, the dark labyrinths of the soul, so be it, because each of those pains is a teacher in disguise. Each absence an invitation to presence, each wound an opening to the light. You who thought you were lost were perhaps merely in transition. You who felt you didn't fit anywhere were perhaps simply growing beyond the shapes that once confined you. And you who saw yourself as a solitary wanderer may be, without knowing, one of the few who have already begun to awaken. The path of those who don't belong is also the path of those who seek truth, and on that path what matters most is not where you arrive, but who you become along the way. Because in the end, maybe the most important thing isn't finding a place to call home, but becoming the home you've always sought. So take a deep breath, embrace your restlessness, and when it comes, a kick as it does on the heaviest nights, smile. It's just a reminder that your soul is alive, and that there's still a road ahead. You don't belong anywhere, but you belong to yourself, and that is enough. You stayed until the end, and that says much more than any like ever could. It means there's something in you that still beats. Even when you're tired, even when you're hurt, even when you're not quite sure where to go, you still feel, and that's rare. In a world where everything screams, feeling in silence is a kind of courage. I want to thank you, not as someone thanking an audience, but as someone who's met a fellow traveler on the same road. Because deep down, this video wasn't made for everyone. It was made for those who carry a void they can't quite name, for those who felt too strange, too deep, too intense, and yet chose to keep going. What we did here wasn't about consuming content. It was about sharing silence, and if, at any point on this journey, these words reached you, do me a favor. Take care of that. Don't rush back into the automatic so fast. Stay for a moment with what you felt. Maybe it will lead you to places no map could ever show. If you'd like to help me keep creating this kind of space, where the soul can breathe, where pain has a voice, where philosophy meets the heart, you already know the way. Like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. But do it as someone lighting a candle, not as someone clicking out of habit. And if you feel there's something you want to say it. Leave in the comments a memory, a question, a silence typed in ellipses. I'll read it. With the eyes of someone who listens. Oh, and that video showing up right there on the side. Maybe it carries an answer you don't yet know you're searching for. Or maybe it's just another question in disguise, but you'll know, you'll feel it, just like every wanderer does. Until the next whisper. And if nothing else makes sense today, remember, you're not lost, you're in transition.